Hello everyone, and welcome to our Root Lab session of today. So today we are no longer questioning the AI value in proven very valuable. But the question is more, how is AI perceived by a larger audience? How is it integrated and how is it used by a large audience, by our society? So today we will have a session where we discuss this topic with first a presentation by our guest speaker, which I will just introduce right after, and then a panel discussion about this topic. So today we have a guest speaker, doctoral researcher at VUB, and she's a member of a research center MOBI, which is stands for Mobility, Logistic, and Automotive Technology. She has a background in mathematics and a PhD in business engineering. She's now working on EU research about the acceptance of autonomous vehicle in society, and she will just present her work right after. We also have Dorian. Dorian is a machine learning engineer at DataRoots, and he is also our machine learning guild master. And we have Bart Smeets, which we don't present anymore, CTO of DataRoots, of course. So we will start with the presentation of Evy. She will present the work that she has been working on.
Thank you, Virginie, for the introduction, and thank you, DataRoots, for inviting me today. So today I will be talking about the research that we conduct at the VUB on autonomous vehicles, which is more broader about the socioeconomic impacts of autonomous vehicles, and I will zoom in on the acceptance in society. As Virginie already mentioned, I belong to the MOBI research group, so I'm here on behalf of them today. You can see on the slide here are 4 core themes that we are working on, and obviously I am connected to the electric and autonomous vehicle team. Maybe also interesting to mention is that MOBI is an interdisciplinary research group. So we are connected to the Faculty of Economics, but also the Faculty of Engineering. So that means that we do both research on the economical aspects, but also on the technology of autonomous vehicles. But for me today, I will be discussing the socioeconomic aspects of autonomous vehicles. And as for the agenda for today, I will first go over what actually is an autonomous vehicle, and then also what are we researching at VUB MOBI about autonomous vehicles, and then zoom into the user aspect. So first of all, let me introduce an autonomous vehicle. So you can see a picture here, which is actually a picture that was already drawn up in the 60s by a famous illustrator. And so I guess this is what the illustrator thought the future would look like. And you can see these people in the autonomous vehicle just hanging out, having a drink, and they are not paying attention to the road anymore at all. Of course, this is very futuristic, and this is not at all the situation of today. And to have a better view of where we are today, the Society of Automotive Engineers have defined different levels of automation. So this is this scale is used in research very frequently. So this is kind of always the scale that we refer to. So there are 6 levels of automation, where 0 is actually no automation and 5 considers full automation. And essentially what we look at is who is in charge of the different driving maneuvers, for example, the steering, acceleration, and deceleration, but then also very important, the monitoring of the driving environment. And then whether the vehicle can still fall back on a human if necessary, and then the operational design domain in which the vehicle is can operate. So as you can see, the first 3 levels, so from 0 till 2, of automation, here the human is still really much in charge of monitoring the environment. And then as of level 3 of automation, the monitoring of the driving environment is done by the vehicle. But of course, in conditional automation, the vehicle will still fall back on the human driver in case the automation system fails. So this means that the driver cannot just sit back and relax, but actually still has to pay attention. In a level 4 automation vehicle, this is less the case, although the vehicle cannot drive just perfectly in every situation. Oftentimes this is in limited areas or in certain weather circumstances that are very good. For example, when it snows, it might be that the sensors of the vehicle don't work as well. And so the driver still has to pay attention. Not even snow, but also in heavy rain, sensors can be somewhat confused sometimes. So the driver cannot sit back and relax. Only in full automation, we can go to the picture that we just saw where we have a drink with the passengers. Now, where are we today? Obviously, we are not at the full automation level. So here you can see a graph. It was a research that was conducted in the US where they predict at which level of automation we will get. And so the first level 5 vehicles are here predicted to be in 2027, although there are a lot of researchers that actually disagree with this. So in the research community, it's been an ongoing discussion of, well, when will level 5 vehicles be available? And also when will they be able, of course, to drive on the road without any failures or where people can just sit back and relax. Now, in terms of AI that comes into the autonomous vehicle, there you can see on this slide, there's a lot of sensors and radar sensors, LiDAR sensors, which are based on light detection. There's, of course, also odometry sensors, ultrasonic sensors, a GPS system, and then cameras that are attached to the vehicle. And of course, all this information needs to be processed in a central computer, and this is where AI comes in. So the machine learning algorithms that are within the vehicle will have to process all this information and then tell the vehicle whether what the environment looks like, if there are any obstacles on the road, and then of course notify the driver in case this is necessary. Some examples of shuttles that have been autonomous shuttles that have been driving around in Belgium, and maybe you were able to take part or you were able to actually be a passenger in one of these. Last year, it's actually already 2 years ago, there was the shuttle pilot at the hospital site in Jette. So this was our own pilot from organized from our university. And then there was also autonomous shuttle driving around in Woluwe Park. That was a shuttle that pilots that was set up by the public transport operator of Brussels, by the MIVB. And currently there's also a shuttle driving around at the hospital site in Ghent at Maria Middelares. So you can still go test it out if you want. Now, important maybe already to mention is that in all these shuttles, so these shuttles can be considered to be level 3 to 4. And according to Belgian law, it is still mandatory to have a safety operator in the vehicle. So we don't call it a driver because there's no actual steering wheel in the vehicle. So the vehicle does all the driving maneuvers. But sometimes when there is an obstacle on the road and the vehicle does not know what to do about this, then the safety operator will have to intervene. For example, they have not a steering wheel, but there's some sort of joystick that they use to maneuver the vehicle, maybe around an obstacle where the vehicle would block. Now, what are we researching at VUB in terms of autonomous vehicles? So, as I said, we go broader than just the acceptance of autonomous vehicles. There is a central research question where we want to see what is the socioeconomic impact of the introduction of autonomous vehicles in society. And to assess this, we are currently building an impact assessment framework, which is actually done within the context of the SHOW project. It's a European project within Horizon 2020, where we want to look at all different components that autonomous vehicles, or all impact areas that autonomous vehicles will influence. Of course, this cannot be done just like that. We need a lot of inputs. And so the different inputs that we have are not only simulation models that we are developing, but also business models. And then understanding the stakeholder perspective. So it's not important to understand just the user perspective, but all different stakeholders that have in interest or a stake in the deployment of autonomous vehicles. So this can be public transport operator, but also local authorities, and then of course the manufacturers and mobility service providers can all be important stakeholders to consider. So we have been evaluating their assessment of autonomous vehicles as well. Also in another European project, which is currently still ongoing, the Drive to the Future project. And then, of course, the most, what is considered by some to be the most important stakeholder is the user. So this can be the user, the passenger, the driver, but then also maybe even broader, the citizen who will interact with the autonomous vehicle, the other road user. And how do we assess the acceptance of the user? Well, in academic literature, this is often done by technology acceptance models. So the original technology acceptance model that is often referred to is the one developed by Davis, and that's already a while ago. And he takes into account different constructs such as perceived usefulness and the ease of use of the user. And this will then in turn influence the attitude, the intention to use, and then the actual usage. Of course, these are further influenced by external variables, which could, for example, be social influence that they feel from their peers. And then in a later stage, this technology acceptance model was, it has been adapted a lot. There's a lot of iterations on this. And one of the acceptance models that we have been using in our studies is the UTAUT model, which is Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology, where aside from the perceived ease of use and the usefulness, we also take into account the social influences already mentioned, and then also the performance expectancy. But then there are a lot of external factors that influence and could moderate these relationships. And this is also what is often investigated, in which sense does gender or age have an influence on this, and the experience that they already have with this technology, for example. Now, we have two main studies in terms of this that we have already conducted. So one study was already in 2015, where an autonomous vehicle, a level 2 vehicle, was used. So level 2 vehicle, this means that the monitoring of the environment still had to be done by the driver, but the steering, acceleration, deceleration, lane keeping was all done by the vehicle. Here we developed a TOM UTAUT based questionnaire, and this was a rather small scale experiment with 27 users, where there was both a pre and post test done to see how their acceptance would change after they had the experience with the autonomous vehicle. Another study that was more recently performed was in 2019. I already mentioned our shuttle driving around at the Brussels Health Campus in Jette. We developed a questionnaire that was then also distributed to the passengers that were using the shuttle by MIVB. In these two shuttles, as I mentioned already earlier, there was a safety operator on board. We again developed a UTAUD-based questionnaire, and here we were able to collect answers from 604 respondents, of which 229 were passengers. And then we had a shorter survey that was conducted with other road users. So we have a rather limited sample of other road users, but it will be interesting in further research to investigate their opinions as well on these shuttles. I want to end with some of the main takeaways from our studies. We see in terms of the autonomous vehicle experience that it increases the autonomous vehicle attitude. So in the first test that we did, where we had a pre and post questionnaire, we see that the test ride had a significant positive effect on the attitudes towards autonomous vehicles. And even more so, we see that people that have a higher anxiety beforehand have a higher increase in attitude after. The second takeaway was, and this was in terms of the passenger survey for our shuttle, is that passengers were overall optimistic on autonomous vehicles, where we saw that over 80% has the intention to use autonomous vehicles in the future. A third takeaway is that over 90% rate the safety from rather good to very good, although we did notice a high appreciation of the safety operator on board, which of course raises some questions to further research, where when it's not legal or mandatory anymore by law to have a safety operator on board, it would be very good to investigate in which sense the presence of the operator still influences the feeling of safety and the experience in general. Also, 75% of the respondents indicated they had no worries regarding autonomous vehicles, which was a good result. In terms of any socio-demographic characteristics influencing the attitude towards autonomous vehicles, we saw that men are more positive towards autonomous vehicles, as they indicate a higher intention to use, and they felt less inconvenienced by the shuttle. Some concerns then lastly, as a last takeaway, is that currently the autonomous shuttles still have a very low speed, and this concerns quite some of the respondents, as they do not see how it will be used in more complex traffic situations and in real traffic for now. Some future research that we want to investigate is, of course, I already mentioned it, what will happen when the safety operator is no longer on board, but also what will happen in more demand-driven environments and complex traffic situations. And then a very important question as well is that as these autonomous shuttles will provide more opportunities for people with limited mobility, we also want to assess the impact on them. So that was it for me. I would like to thank you all for attending already. And if you have any more questions on research, you can always contact me or any of my colleagues.
You're on mute.
Yes, sorry. Thanks a lot, Evy. I wanted to say this was a very interesting presentation. I think it opens a lot of interesting questions, because I personally was not really aware that there are such a framework to ask these kind of questions around acceptance of AI. And I think it's important that we have those kind of framework, and maybe it's not very well known in by our audience or by our society in general. I think there is still a very mystical aura around everything touching AI. So thanks a lot for this. I don't know, Dorian, Bart, did you have any?
Yeah, I have, for example, a question like, is there a reason why they are using it at a hospital? Because it seems to me like it's a strange place to do the first experiments with autonomous vehicles.
Yeah,
It's close
yeah.
to the emergency room.
Indeed. A good point, actually.
It's a good question. For us, so in terms of autonomous shuttles, we have to first of all find a use case. So these shuttles are oftentimes used for first last mile connections, as the speed is currently still quite low. Due to the fact that the technology is not that advanced, we have to look for sites where the traffic situation is not too complex. So for our own shuttle pilots, we deployed it first on the private terrain surrounding the hospital. So it was actually behind the hospital. It was on the university campus to first test out the technicalities or actually the technical maturity of the vehicle. And that was a private terrain, although there were also cars and bikers. So there were a lot of road users, but it was not as busy as on a normal street. So also MIVB tested it out first in a park where there were no other road users, just pedestrians. To make sure that the shuttle was not inconveniencing any other traffic. So that's usually the way it goes. First, we look for a private test site where we want to test out the vehicle. And then in a second instance, we move to a more public site, which was then around the hospital. So that was the phase 2. And then we had to, unfortunately, suspend the testing due to COVID. So we weren't able to go through the whole second phase. I think why it is a hospital is mainly a coincidence. So for us, it's our other campus. So it's just at VUB, we have 2 campuses. There's one in Etterbeek, there is one in Jette. And then the use case was just better in surrounding the Jette hospital. In Ghent, the reason why they are doing it on a hospital site is because they actually currently had, or before they deployed the autonomous shuttle, they had a regular shuttle driving around there, so with a driver. As there were different pilots happening throughout Belgium, they thought, well, actually, maybe it will be interesting if we try this out and see if we can replace our current shuttle, where we still need a driver, by an autonomous shuttle. And then in the end, once the safety operator is no longer necessary, it could actually save them a lot of money in terms of driving costs, maybe.
Okay, makes sense. I actually have an additional idea for you guys then maybe as well. Like in Ghent Centrum, you have also this wandelbus. So it's like a bus for pedestrians as well, for if you're like you want to rest a bit. So that might also be potentially a good experiment then to start using autonomous vehicles, since the traffic situation over there is also only pedestrians and public transports.
Okay, yeah, it would be nice to test out additional use cases.
And for these shuttles, how autonomous is autonomous? Because you mentioned level 3, 4, I think. Like what does that mean? Like, can you really say like, please drive from point A to B, and then when the bus is full, drive back, or how autonomous is autonomous?
Yes. So for a level 3 vehicle, well, maybe it's easier if I just say how these shuttles perform. So actually what is done is they are calibrated on a fixed trajectory. So in that sense, if you would take the shuttle and put it somewhere else on a road, it would not know what to do anymore. So according to GPS localization, the shuttle is calibrated. and knows his exact trajectory.
Okay.
And then a technician comes, and there is there's like a 1 or 2 week setup where the shuttle just drives back and forth the whole time over the same trajectory, and there are little adjustments that are made so that the shuttle knows exactly what to do. Now the safety operator just has to press the start button, let's say, once all passengers are on board, and then the shuttle just drives from the start to the end destination completely by itself, unless there is an obstacle on the road where the shuttle has no idea how to process this, and then the safety operator has to take over. One of the problems currently also with these shuttles, they're Easy Mile and Navia shuttles, is that in the current software, they do not know how to overtake an obstacle. So if a car is parked, they just stop and the safety operator has to take over. But in a next update, they are trying to already have a workaround around this, so that at least the shuttle will already be able to pass by a fixed obstacle that is on the road.
Okay.
Sorry, I dropped out of the my internet connection kicked me. Maybe we can answer the question from Victor, which is asking, in terms of economic impact, are there any projections regarding how this can affect employment rates, how this could affect public's perception on this matter?
Yeah, so this is something that we haven't looked into personally yet. However, there is a study, a European study, that is currently done on how the employment rates are being affected. And it's oftentimes one of the worries that people have. Okay, so now all the drivers are going to be replaced, and what is going to happen to all these jobs? But then, of course, we also have to think back that a lot of these revolutions, let's say, already happened a lot in the past as well, where there was automation of a lot of agricultural activities, but also in factories. And there's, of course, jobs that are disappearing, but at the same time, more jobs that are being created. So it's not, we cannot just say a lot of jobs will disappear. There will probably also be a lot of jobs that will be created. And that is something that is currently also being studied in a lot of these European studies on the effect on employment rate.
Yeah, and I think it's not only about autonomous vehicles. This question is also more broad than just autonomous vehicle. It's on all AI related topics, I would say, and also. So what's your opinion? I mean, on how should we collaborate with this AI? I mean, I found it very interesting, your first slide about those different levels of automation, and I think it could probably be also applicable to other AI projects and not only autonomous vehicle. Is there something like that already in place for other AI related project? Do you know? Or
not immediate. I do not know immediately, but I think the way we have to think about AI and how it will help us is, for me, in first instance, in terms of safety. So of course, I'm thinking a lot now, also from the autonomous vehicle perspective, is that we can use AI to support us. We don't have to blindly trust it, but we can use the decision-making of AI or the outcome of the decision-making as a support and to notify us when we have to actually intervene. And I think in first sense that is a really important development, because the human error is always bigger than the machine error. A lot of these algorithms are really much on point right now. So I feel that we should trust them to support our decision-making.
Well, for example, if people become a bit more careless, since they already get the assistance of the AI, so you already showed us that the attitude increases after there's already like the sense of safety. Like, whose fault is it then in the end when there is an accident? Who is
Mhm.
liable?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I don't think there's a specific answer on that yet. But yeah, of course, in these, the fact that the vehicle cannot do everything yet at the moment also implies that the driver still has to be alert at all times. And so they cannot just sit back and relax. So when an accident happens right now, the driver is still liable. So there have been some accidents with Teslas, for example, that are being tested in the US, even some fatal accidents. And so here the driver was still assumed to pay attention, and he did not. So then, of course, he is still liable.
Is there any training for people before they start using those kind of Teslas then, or not? Because I can imagine that maybe some sort of autonomous vehicle driver license could help with this.
Yeah. So yes, there are, and also for the shuttles that we implemented. Here there are usually bus drivers that receive a supplementary training on top of the training they already have, and it takes about 2 weeks where they learn how to use the autonomous vehicle, what to do, mostly in terms of failure. So what they have to do when the vehicle gives an error and they need to intervene.
But do you think that in general, we have enough training as citizens about AI? Because now it's integrating almost any components of our life. Even the fridge can be connected and intelligent to make your shopping list. But most importantly, all those devices like Alexa or Siri, these kind of AI, are they enough explained to the audience, I would say, and are they enough regulated?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Actually, I feel like a lot of people still think of AI as something that is science fiction in a way. So when you talk to a lot of people about AI, they still think that after a while robots will just start making their own decisions. And so I feel like a lot of people are not well informed about what the possibilities are, but also what the consequences will be when you start using a lot of AI.
There's actually there was some news about a leaked memo from the European Union, right, last week on regulating AI in general. I don't know the exact details, but it's about regulating AI that can have a high risk impact, like bodily harm. I think the autonomous vehicles is a potential example, but also influencing behavior that you normally would not show, that through an AI, you're influenced to do so. Which I think, if the memo is real, is at least good that people are thinking about this, because it will have an impact on society. And also the question of Victor in terms of economic impact, I think it will be huge. I think perhaps, but I'm really talking about my pay grade, above my pay grade here. But my gut feeling is that, like, on a macroeconomic level, you will have a value creation, but on a individual level, this is like super negative. Like if you've been a truck driver for 20 years and you're replaced by an autonomous vehicle, I mean, you're not going to find one of the new jobs that is created in this field. So it is a challenge, and I think it's good that we're thinking about this at the government level and also at the European level.
I think indeed being aware of it is the first step before doing the next step. Like awareness is a very important thing, and in our job, I think we are encountering those kind of dilemmas where awareness is the first obvious important step to take there. Maybe we can take the question from Xavier or Boris. Any major incident involving autonomous vehicle will attract a lot of public attention. That's true. We are always looking at edge cases, despite the tech probably being safer than typical cars. But how can we tackle this kind of biases, cognitive biases, basically, that humans have when they see, like, it's the same with planes. Planes are very safe and usually are not perceived as safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very true. There was a lot of public attention for the accidents that have already happened with autonomous vehicles. So I very much agree. Although there are a lot of studies that show that over 90% of errors in cars are due to the fault of the driver. So if we take away the control in a way, or part of the control from the driver, then this would decrease the accident rate a lot. But indeed, people are usually not very much influenced by these numbers, but rather than by one occurrence that causes an accident.
I think it's also because people tend to be in control of their own destiny, and just the idea of maybe like a machine having that sort of control. It's hard for people psychologically to like give it like their full trust, maybe.
Maybe a bit
But are we
linked to
not
this,
also? Go ahead, Bart.
maybe a bit linked to this comment by Boris. A question about the research that you're doing, Evy. What was the motivation to start studying this? Like, did you see that there was no acceptance of this, or what was the reasoning behind studying this?
Well, it's because public acceptance is essentially one of the crucial elements if we want to have a breakthrough in the autonomous vehicle technology. Because if people do not accept it, then there will be no breakthrough. And so that is kind of the consensus also in literature, is that people need experience before they will want to eventually try it in the future, or want to use it more in the future. And so by having these pilot tests, so we have pilots in Belgium, but there's pilots all over Europe, all over the world that are being conducted, just to also make people aware of this technology. And then, of course, for research purposes, to study in which sense they will accept it and what are the barriers as well. So if we know the barriers, then maybe we can tackle these barriers already.
Yeah, interesting. And this is also, of course, like very multifactorial, like all the legislation that needs to happen to have actually these level 5 cars on the road when the tech gets there. Basically requires user acceptance before you can get the legislation.
Yeah, and then a lot of attention is usually put on the passenger or the drivers in the vehicles. Less attention has gone to the other road users. So we had a small survey. So we only had 75 people answering. So there's no really general conclusions that we can draw there. But if you just think about it, when you cross the street and you see a vehicle coming, what you often do is you make eye contact with the driver. So this is something that you cannot do anymore with an autonomous vehicle. So there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration there as well. There's been suggestions of giving the autonomous vehicle a smiley face, for example, so that it can indicate that it has actually noticed you, and so that you know as a pedestrian that you can cross the street. But so there's a lot of things that we do not consider at first that are important there.
That's actually a very fun idea, that smiley face. A bit on that, like, wouldn't it be easier? Because right now, I think one of the complexities, it sounds like technologically, to break through with autonomous vehicles is that they need to be able to live together with cars that are not autonomous. Wouldn't it be easier if they just made all cars autonomous, so that they could actually, just like a swarm, communicate with each other?
Mm-hmm.
A bit sci-fi, but yeah.
No, but yeah, that is also the connectedness. So the vehicles that would just communicate with each other, and then everything would go smoothly. But yeah, that would be an ideal situation where just we say, okay, as of tomorrow, all regular vehicles are replaced, and there's all autonomous vehicles. Of course, that would make it a lot easier. But I think that in reality, it's not possible, and we have to find a way to implement them more gradually on the road.
Maybe you can do it in Vaticaanstad, in the Vatican. Like, not a lot of people there, so.
But this is maybe related to the next question from Xavier. What sort of new additional equipment or infrastructure was necessary to allow these to work, but also that will allow it to work with those other road vehicles which are not autonomous?
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you would look at it on a larger scale, then 5G becomes very important. So for the smaller scale pilots that we conducted, we still did it with 4G. So that's indeed an important component to have. And then in terms of other road infrastructure, well, if there are traffic lights, for example, that will be on the road, then they will have to be able to communicate with the vehicle. Again, in our small scale pilot, we didn't have any traffic lights yet. What was necessary, though, in terms of infrastructure adaptations that we had to do, was, as I mentioned earlier, the vehicle cannot overtake or the current software doesn't allow to overtake, for example, a parked vehicle. So we had to make sure that vehicles were not parked wrongly. And so we had to, basically make sure, because that was a problem at the university campus, is that vehicles would just park anywhere they think. So we really had to make sure that along the trajectory, vehicles would not do this. So you kind of have to clean up the trajectory beforehand and make sure that there are no obstacles there, which is also why we installed lane separators between the two lanes. So it was just a regular road, but then some lane separators were installed so that vehicles wouldn't have the chance to park wrongly anymore. But those were the small infrastructure adaptations that we had to do. But if you look at it on a larger scale, then of course you have to consider a lot more in terms of communication with stop signs or just any road signs and communication with lights.
Like in general, it's well, in the technology of these autonomous vehicles, is like the trajectory encoded in it, or is it purely on image recognition?
Well, so for the shuttles that were deployed, there was a calibrated trajectory. But of course, in a full automation, so in a level 5 that we would reach in the future, then it would be based on image recognition, but also on GPS localization. So the vehicle knows where the road is, and then for the rest, it can detect objects based on the different sensors, radar, LiDAR, also camera processing that happens inside the central computer.
In the context of autonomous vehicles, is there a formal definition of what AI is? Because AI means today a lot of things. What does it mean in the context of autonomous vehicles?
Good question, Bart. I don't know. What does AI mean to you?
That's a good question as well. I think that the term has become a bit vague, because there's a lot of hype behind it. I think to me, AI is an algorithm that can either like influence behavior to some extent or automate some steps that you take to some extent. And still, that is a very, very vague definition. And in that context, in the terms of autonomous vehicles, like to me, it is more than just image recognition or these type of things. So like there's also a lot of heuristics probably going on, which is part of a smart algorithm for this car to make decisions.
Yeah. We don't, at our side of the, so in our side of MOBI, we don't study the AI components. So that's what the engineers are doing. So they process all the data that comes in and see how it can be, best processed to give some good results.
Oh. And what I'm wondering, if in your research, because you look at this user acceptance level, to me, like one of the big questions that's also open is the question of liability. Do you touch upon this, like people's opinion on who should be liable if an accident happens? Like I have an opinion on it, but
no, that's a whole other stream of research that we haven't looked into. So, but I know there is a lot of research also that exists on this, and everybody indeed has an opinion on this, on who should be liable.
Yeah, because I mean, gut feeling, like if I'm in a car and I can't do anything about it and I'm in an accident, then I should not be liable, right? If I have no influence on it. But for that to be the case, like there is a completely new insurance system has to be set up, a completely new legislation. Like we're very far from that. Huh?
Yeah, that's another impact indeed, is what will happen to any insurance that we currently have for cars. So it will have to be completely rethought in that sense.
Because if you would turn it around, like if you say to me, you're in a fully autonomous vehicle, but you're liable for everything that happens, then I probably don't want to be in a fully autonomous vehicle. Then we get back to the acceptance.
Indeed.
Are there actually because as computer scientists, we're doing a lot of research to making these technology improvements and creating these autonomous vehicles, for example. But are lawyers also already looking up into how they should create these laws, or is it just a standstill and they are doing more important things?
No, they are looking more into the legal component of this as well. So it's something that is also happening European wide, because even in traffic law, it used to say that the driver had to be on board of the vehicle. So even remote supervision was not possible. But so now they have adapted the wording in the law a little bit so that you could at least get the driver out of the vehicle and have a remote supervision. But so in Belgium, like I said, it's still mandatory to have the safety operator on board at all times. So, but it will evolve, and I mean, is what we expect at least. And then there have to be lawyers that think about how to word this exactly and see what the implications are, of course.
I think this technology is a very good example of all the aspects that are in place when you develop an AI project, because it's very visible, it has a lot of attention, so all these aspects are in place: legal aspect, acceptance of people, also explanation, safety, all those are very much under control, I would say. But there are a lot of other AI which are way less regulated and maybe could benefit from a very similar approach than what we are discussing today. I don't know, what's your opinion on this? Maybe Bart, Dorian, in your project?
Well, what I've already sensed in projects is that for business to completely comply with like machine learning algorithm, they have often maybe sometimes unrealistic expectations of what in the end will be delivered. So if it makes a mistake, a little mistake in their business, it can have an impact. And so it's often that they shouldn't use it as the ground truth, these machine learning models, this AI. And sometimes it's a bit hard to persuade them to just use it as a help mechanism, and it's sometimes hard to persuade them that they can become more productive by using it more in this way than more as just something that does everything for them, and that they can start becoming a bit more lazier in their work. It's it's unfortunate, but yeah, it needs to be. It's really, I feel like AI and people working with the machine learning models, they need to cooperate still, and like full automation is often a bit like unrealistic. Do you agree?
I agree. But I think the user acceptance plays a part in all things that have to do with AI, right?
Yeah.
For people to use an AI model, like be it as big as an autonomous vehicle, or be it to say from now on we're not going to send out emails by hand, we're going to use a recommendation engine. For the people that actually use this day to day, that need to send out these recommendations, they're not going to just use it. They want to see how it works. They need to understand how it works to be able to trust it before they actually start using a new methodology. So I think that this trend is very much a cross-domain challenge. And of course, like with autonomous vehicles, it has much more impact if something does go wrong. So the barrier is way higher, and that's why I think this research that Evy is doing needs to happen. But like the same challenge applies in much smaller cases.
Mm-hmm. I think for these larger cases like autonomous vehicles, but then I'm also thinking about like very big NLP projects within tech giants, where they also have some problem with data being biased. Is like that maybe there must be some way of governing like how data is being used in machine learning models itself. Because I feel like at this moment there's not really any regulation that's next to GDPR, which is already very good, but which is also only in Europe. That that maybe like on a global level there should be some way that there are laws on how we use data and how we make sure that it's not biased to make like terrible mistakes when it's too late to correct them.
Yeah, I think maybe authorities are a bit behind on those regulations.
But I think the leaked memo is very relevant here. It's,
do you have more information on this leaked memo?
Yeah, it is coming in.
I'll add a link to it. But basically, it's a memo by the European Union for a regulation on high risk AI. And that they want to regulate this, and there are a lot of stipulations on in what context, and also even what the fine is if you do not adhere to it. So it's very concrete, and I think it has. So one is bodily harm, of course, but also like you cannot as a governmental body like use an AI model to, for example, like in a penitentiary system, to decide things, and which. And I like I said, I don't know the details. You should read it yourself. I'll post a link, but I think this is very interesting that this is actively going on, because if you talk about bias in a broad sense, I mean bias is inherent in our society, but if you use like AI typically uses patterns that we've already seen. If you use this to make decisions, the bias that is inherent in your society is not necessarily the thing that you aspire for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed.
And that is potentially a big difference, and it's good to be aware of that.
Also, like misinformation, like especially then in NLP, when you read a lot of text, there'll probably a lot of misinformation. If your model is trained on that misinformation, it will propagate that misinformation, and we will see it all on our Facebook feed.
You sound like you talk from experience, though.
No. No, it's my opinion.
We have a few more questions. So we have Virginie?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my connection is real bad. We can maybe take one last question, and
I'll put it on screen. We have a question from Victor, Dr. Rombaut. Based on the research of your group, what are your projections for the next 5 to 10 years? Not in terms of predicting the future, but rather trends.
That's a hard question.
We can look back at this in 10 years from now. Evy.
No, is this link still available? Oh no. Can we pick another question? Rather trends. So essentially, there's a lot of things that we can take into account here in terms of predictions for the next 5 to 10 years. Essentially, one of the predictions is, of course, that the lower levels of autonomous vehicles will become more frequently available. So we see it, for example, also in Volvo cars, that they are really promoting this right now, especially just even if it's only noticing an obstacle and braking. So it's braking for you now, the vehicle. We're all used to cruise control, but then that is rather just in keeping the speed, but then also, acceleration and deceleration and lane keeping will be some of these autonomous vehicle technologies that will become more available. So in terms of this, we expect a transition. So not immediately all level 5 autonomous vehicles on the road, as Dorian suggested. But the fact that there will be a transition period will also entail that people are getting more experience with it. And from what we have noticed is that through this experience, people have a better attitude towards it and are more inclined to use it. Also, one of the trends that we hope will happen in the future is that we don't just replace our own private car by an autonomous car, but the fact that they are autonomous will make people more inclined to share vehicles. So that's really also what the European Commission is trying to work towards. So, for example, the SHOW project that we're now working on is really on shared autonomous vehicles for worldwide adoption, they even say. So it's really what is on high on the research agenda, because just replacing all cars with an autonomous car is not going to have a good societal impact, maybe in terms of safety, but it will not give any benefits for the environment. It will not give and of course, in terms of the current situation with COVID, the question is also in which way are people willing to share vehicles in the future? Maybe we've all just kind of become germ obsessed and germaphobes, and we don't want to get into a vehicle anymore with someone else. So this has definitely kind of put a hold on the whole sharing where we're trying to work towards. Because also currently there is the autonomous shuttle driving around in Ghent, but of course the capacity is more limited than usual as we need to respect certain social distancing rules. So that has certainly influenced these trends that we are working towards.
I think it's a very good ending question with a lot of still open challenges. When we thought sharing would be the future, then the COVID comes and it reinvents the whole question. So I think it was interesting. Thanks a lot, Evy, for joining us today. And I think we had a very nice conversation. Thanks, Bart and Dorian, also for participating and sharing with us today. And I think we have tonight another Root Labs session, Bart.
Yes, on Tour de Tools, on Playwright Python and Dexter, which you can find on our meetup.
Voila. So for the one interested, see you tonight, and otherwise have a nice afternoon.
Thanks a lot, all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.